Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll get started on the hour. So, by my clock, we have about 2.5 minutes left to go. Hello, how's the weather in Moose Jaw today? Sunny and warm. Sun
Sounds
is
like a good
just coming
time.
out here. It's been cloudy all day here, but it's looks like
Yeah,
it's coming out.
It's clearing up a little bit. It looked like it was going to rain this morning, but doesn't sound like it's too bad over in Moose Jaw right now.
Yeah. I think we have about the same weather as you're having right now. It's bearable.
We are not in
No,
Ottawa.
we're
We
in
are
Winnipeg.
in Winnipeg.
So we're just
Sorry, we're
down the
doing
road
this
from.
talking thing at the same time. I'm going to let you take the wheel here, Diane.
Hi, Mavis. How are you today? Hi, Brianne. Nice to see you. Glad to hear you're doing well. It's not supposed to cool off here until Sunday, I think. They're calling for rain and it's going to get a little bit cooler.
I'm okay with that though.
Me too.
My garden still has a few tomatoes that are coming up and real small, so the water will do them good.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah. Hi, Melissa. How are you today? All right. So it is on the hour. So we are going to get started. Today, we are fortunate enough to have Antosh Kilok here to help with this presentation, and we're going to look at mixing things up. The Army Run is 3 weeks away, I think, for the start of the Army Run period, and the Navy Bike Ride is just ending. There's only 4 more days, I think, left of it, as well as if you've been doing the CAF challenge, it ends at the end of the month. And if you've been doing the Cancer Ride, it ends at the end of the month as well. So things are wrapping up. But looking at mixing up, if things are getting boring or you're losing your motivation, Antosh is here today to be able to talk about how we can mix things up. Did you want to do a little introduction of yourself, Antosh?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Antosh, guys. I'm a PSP fitness and sports instructor from 17 Wing Winnipeg. And we're going to be talking about mixing it up today in terms of variation in your training. This is my first webinar I'm doing online, so I hope I don't sound too nervous. Please take it easy on me if I do, but I'm going to try to be as audible and answer all of your questions that you may have as they come up. I will let you guys know this presentation is going to be a little information heavy. So you may want to have a pen, paper, just kind of jot down things that you may want to look up later. You may want to go and give this a rewatch after the fact because I am going to try to get a lot of information at you. Think about having a sip of water out of a fire hose. I'm going to throw a lot at you. Hope that something will stick. You'll get something out of it and at least point you in the right direction of kind of where to go for more information from here. All right.
That sounds great. All right. So if you've missed a session, here's a list of all the sessions that we've had so far. This list is also available on calf connection website. So if you don't have it, but if you wanted to take a picture of this list, please feel free to do so, and so that you can get the information that you may have missed. So going over our standard before we get started, before Antosh gets in with all his information for you, just a reminder that the presentation that you're about to view is the intellectual property of the Department of National Defense. So any reproduction or retransmission of the slides contained in this presentation are strictly forbidden. So please don't do it unless we tell you you can. Some of the topics discussed in this webinar may be of sensitive nature and not appropriate for children, so we ask for your discretion. I think in this case, not so necessarily as a sensitive nature, but just maybe not appropriate for children and their development. Please understand that any stories that people tell are theirs alone to tell, and anything shared in the webinar in the chat box is not to be discussed outside this webinar. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing later on CAF Connection and eventually on the PSP YouTube channel. So although we would like active participation, if you simply want to follow along without using the chat or the function, that is perfectly fine. We don't mind that at all. So we're going to go to our first poll. So if you wouldn't mind telling us who you are, whether you're a serving member, veteran, family member, other, that would be great. So it looks like currently we have a majority of civilian employees, but we have a veteran. Nice to have you here, a family member, and hopefully later on, maybe somebody will come in late who is a serving member, so we'll have everybody represented. So now I am going to hand over this presentation to Antosh.
Awesome. Thank you, Diane. Oh, double click there.
We've done that one.
There we go. So we're going to talk about what's on the menu for today. So we're going to talk about where I'm getting all this information from, where it's referenced from, kind of the objectives of training, definitions that I want to go over just to make sure we're using the same language. So when I say I'm talking about a banana, you don't think it's an orange because you named an orange a banana type deal. We're going to talk about some key concepts. We're going to have a little practical applications session, or a section rather, and we're going to talk about some events that are coming up and kind of how to tie all these things in together. Okay. Again, like always, if you're having trouble with the audio, just put in the chat and I'll be checking that up periodically. If you have any questions, throw it in there. I'll do my best to answer them. If I can't answer them, I'll at least point you in the right direction of where you can go to get that information. Okay. So here we go. References. There's only really one. It's Periodization, Theory, and Methodology of Training by Bompa and Half. This textbook right here is kind of, in my opinion, the most comprehensive text about how to organize training to get the desired result out of it. It's also written in fairly easily understandable languages for people that don't have an exercise science background. So if you're really interested in some of the things that we are talking about and you want to find out more, the textbook is a really great place to go to get that extra information. Okay. And I won't be trying to read Latin or another language all too much. Okay. Again, I'm just putting this in there because these ideas are not my own. Everything is from the text. I actually did pull some graphs and images from the text as well that we will be referencing that I will use to illustrate a few ideas here. Okay. And we're going to move on. So bear with me half a second here. So we're going to talk about the objective of training. And I'm just going to turn off my camera just because you probably don't want to be looking at my ugly mug here for the entire hour. Okay. Okay, here. The objective of training is to better prepare the athlete for the highest level of performance. Okay. And it's really important to make sure we understand that this is how we're going to look at training today. It's not going to be for health reasons. It's not going to be for managing stress. The lens that we are looking at this through is for the highest level of performance. And I state that just because with the other two, they don't always coincide. So I just want to get that out of the way. Make sure we're on the same page. And like I mentioned before, this is going to be pretty information heavy, so make sure you have your pen and paper, write down some notes. I will leave a little space here and there where I'll ask questions, try to be interactive. May not be as interactive as some of the previous sessions, but like always, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. I'll be checking those as we go along. Okay, so like I said before, we are going to go over some definitions. And I'm just going to go off of these one by one. Kind of when I finish the slide, I'll ask if there are any questions at the end of the slide before I go to the next one, because we have a few slides of definitions here. So multilateral physical development, or it's otherwise known as general fitness, what that is, it provides the training foundation for success in all sports, which targets bimotor abilities such as endurance, speed, strength, mobility, and coordination. You could think of it as kind of like the foundation for what all later training is kind of based off of, okay? Sports-specific physical development, otherwise known as specialized training, is the development of physiological characteristics specific to the sport. So for an example, developing the aerobic energy system if you're running a 5K. That's the energy system you're going to be primarily using when you're running a 5-kilometer run. So making sure that's adequately developed to ensure optimal performance, that's going to be great for that. Okay. After that, we got technical skills, which are skills that are necessary for success in the sport. So an example of this, it would be kind of like your stride mechanics in running. To use a not running example, if we take a look at the sport of tennis, just the technique of how to do a backhand swing, okay? After that, we have tactical abilities. So these are competitive strategies that are used in competition. So an example of this would be kind of like knowing how to pace yourself in a particular run, but not only just for the length of the run, but also that particular course you're running. Because as if anyone here has done any sort of running before, not all courses are the same. Some are in different elevations and have different grade inclines, declines, because the ground isn't always even. Sometimes you might be running uphill, downhill. So just kind of knowing how to pace yourself in that. Another example, not for running would be kind of how a boxer would go in with a fight plan into a fight. They know their opponent is good at X, Y, so they're going to implement strategy Z to maybe wear them down in the first 2 rounds, and then in the 3rd round, barrage them with a bunch of damage to the body, okay? Psychological factors are the mental factors that are important for successful athletic performance. So an example of this was visualization. So I know you guys talked a lot about that in the previous presentation last week, so I won't beat a dead horse here. But just all the preparatory things that you can do that don't have to do with your physical body. You can kind of think of those as psychological factors there, okay? After that, we have health maintenance, which can be thought of as the work done to maintain health and well-being of the athlete. So like I said before, high performance and high health don't always coincide. So the reason why we just throw this in here is to make sure that we do take care of an athlete's health long term. So if we do periods of really high stressful loading, we make sure to follow that up with some kind of rest and restitution so we don't get overtraining or burnout, which I'll talk to in a bit. And another way to think about this is kind of like periodic medical examination. So just making sure your athletes and people you work with get physicals every year. There's nothing underlying going on with their health. Like I mentioned before, alternating periods of hard work with periods of regeneration and restitution, which refers to just kind of appropriate organization of training. After that, we have injury risk management, which is a training strategy used to maximize athletic performance and minimizing the risk for injury. So again, this is just going to point towards using appropriate scheduling of training, nutrition, and recovery strategies. Some people may call this injury prevention, which isn't really a good term because there's no way we can 100% prevent injuries from happening, especially when we're talking about performance. There's certain things that we can do to elicit greater performance, but they all come at some sort of risk. So just knowing how to evaluate the risk of those and kind of choose the most appropriate strategy for the related context. Okay. After that is theoretical knowledge. So that's kind of the base of knowledge that the athlete should be cognizant of when participating in a sport. This includes physiological, psychological bases of training, planning, nutrition, and regeneration. So think of it as the athlete themselves knowing a lot about their sport. And this is really important as it helps the athlete take greater ownership over their performance. It gets them more involved, other than essentially. So I'm going to give you guys, what's it called? A second, write in the chat. Do you have any questions on any of those before we move on? I'll give you guys 30 seconds, a minute. If not, I'll just go in a second.
A thumbs up if you have no questions, and that might help Antosh know that it's okay to move on.
Good. Okay, we're going to go on. So, more definitions. So, adaptation. It's a phenomenon where a new homeostatic norm is established as a result of exposure to stress stimuli. And it's going to be highly specific to the type of training undertaken. So, basically, every time we do a training of any sort, it's a stress placed on our body, and it's how our body responds to that stress to be able to handle that stress in the future. Again, we're going to be looking at a few graphs that kind of explain this a little better. And it's always going to be very specific to the type of training done. So, for example, if you do a bicep curl, the adaptation that's going to happen to your body is going to be such that you're able to do that type of bicep curl better next time you do the bicep curl. So if you do a bicep curl, you're not going to grow bigger calves because that isn't specific to being better to do a bicep curl. Okay. Overreaching, that is a short-term decrement in performance capacity that occurs as a result of accumulation of fatigue resulting from training. For example, concentrated loading and non-trading stressors. Okay, so again, we will talk about this with a graph in just a second, which I will be able to illustrate a little better. We have overtraining, which is an inability to adapt to constantly varying training loads and stressors associated with the training and competition. We have compensation, which is an increase in performance as a result of training stimuli. We have supercompensation, which is the relationship between work and regeneration that leads to superior physical, metabolic, and neuropsychological adaptations. I will switch slides real quick here. We're going to talk about this just a little bit, okay? Jump a little head, a little back. So again, we're going to key concepts. We're going to look at general adaptive syndrome, or GAS, and supercompensation is going to be the one on the right. They're both very similar. General adaptive syndrome, that's basically how our body adapts to any sort of stress, okay? So if you're looking at the graph with me, on the x-axis, we have time, and on the y-axis, we have level of performance, okay? So you see, we're going kind of nice and flat until we have the training stimulus, okay? From there, we go down. That's going to be your level of performance. After the stimuli, there's going to be a slight decrease, which is what we talked about in overreaching. And then as time goes on and we're able to recover, our body has adapted and we have kind of a new homeostatic level of what we're capable of doing. So that's kind of that C part of the graph on the left. Okay. And if we take a look at the one on the right, it's essentially the same graph. It just has a few other things on it to illustrate a little more. So we have the stimulus. Uh, Again, performance goes down, and then over time it goes up. Then after about 2 days, 24, 48 hours, it is a little higher than what it was before. Okay, that part of the curve is called the super compensation, the new kind of new level performance we're able to do because of the training stimuli that we subjected ourselves to. And then over time, if we don't provide another stimulus for training, there's an involution or kind of a return back to our old homeostatic norm of level of performance. I know that's kind of a lot to take in, so I'll give you guys a second with that. I will talk about a few things a little more in regards to that curve. So as you guys can see, there's phases beneath there, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll talk about those each time. So phase 1 is the significant decrease in performance. So let's just say you did upper body workout. Okay, keep it nice and general. After 1 to 2 hours post workout, you're not going to be able to go back and do the same workout. You're going to be very tired, not be able to put up the same poundages if you just try to again. After the 2 hours, so basically 1 day to 2 days after, that fatigue you build up and the level of performance that decreased from the initial stimuli will start to go back up to the homeostatic norm. And phase 3, 36, about 72 hours, that's that super compensation. So the new level of new level of performance that we're able to achieve because we were able to provide a stimuli. So that's kind of the new performance. And the last phase, which is 3 to 7 days, it's an involution back to homeostasis of your normal performance. Okay, so that's super compensation and a few of those other things that we talked about just drawn out. So for those of you who are visual, that may help a little bit. So I'm going to jump back. Oh, here we go. Okay. Fatigue can be defined as a temporary decrease in performance as a result of stimuli, which we talked about. Involution is a reduction in performance capacity. And progressive overload is a training principle that states that best performance is achieved by systemically alternating training loads, training volumes, bioenergetic specificity in a progressive fashion that leads to greater capacity and performance over time. Okay? So again, 30 seconds, write a quick question in the comments. If you guys are hunky-dory, we'll move on. Okay, we're gonna move. Okay, few more. Biological age. That's how long someone has lived on this planet. So me, I'm 27. My biological age is 27 because I'm 27 years old. And that differs from training age because training age, that's defined as the number of years that someone has been preparing or training for a sporting activity. Okay, training age and biological age are not always the same because think of it this way. You can have a 20-year-old who has been training since they were 12. All right, so if we do the quick math there, that's a training age of 8 years. I'm no mathematician, so correct me on my math if I'm wrong there. So that person who has a biological age of 20 has a training age of 8. Conversely, if there's a person who is 50 and they've just been training for 1 year, they're trying to make some positive life changes. Their biological age is 50, but their training age is 1. Okay. So those people will have very different abilities when it comes to how they're able to perform. Um, that's different than just how people would age kind of in a biological order, if that makes sense. So typically, the person with the larger training age will be capable of doing much more than the person with the lower training age. Okay? Periodization, that's the systemic organization of training to elicit higher levels of sporting performance. So I know that wasn't as much as last time, but any questions on that? Again, 30 seconds before we move on here. Cool. Moving on. So this is just an overview of the key concepts we're going to talk about. This is just going to help us learn a little more about how the body responds to training. It'll be a little more interactive. I will ask you a few questions here, but these are kind of the basic things that we're going to talk about, okay? So moving on again. So GAS, general adaptive syndrome. Like I said before, I'm not going to go over this too much because we touched on that already. It's how the body responds to stress stimuli, okay? I'll give you guys another 30 seconds to look at this graph before we move on. Okay, here we go. We're going to talk about energy systems. So it's really important to know what energy system we're going to be training, just because the different tasks that we may be doing in sports, whether that be going out for a 10K bike ride versus doing some bodybuilding style training in the gym versus going to 9-round kickboxing for a little class that way. The way we fuel our body will be fueled will be different, and it's important to know this molecule right here called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. It's a high energy compound in the body, and when it's broken down, it releases energy. And when that energy is released, it's used by our body to produce work. Okay, think of it kind of like as a currency exchange. It's kind of the thing that is exchanged in the body to make our muscles move and for us to do things. Okay, we have three energy systems. The first one we're going to talk about is the phosphagen system. And it basically, we get ATP from three reactions. There's ATP in our body, in our muscles, kind of all the time. So how we get the breakdown of that is, like I said before, adenosine triphosphate's broken down to adenosine diphosphate and inorganic phosphate, and energy is released. We use that energy for work. Okay. Number two is the breakdown of phosphocreatine molecules. That's broken down into inorganic phosphate and creatine. And then we take the inorganic phosphate, we add it to adenosine diphosphate, and then we get ATP, which can then be broken down again. So we get lots of energy that way. And then we have adenosine diphosphate molecules, which is broken down to adenosine monophosphates plus inorganic phosphate. We take the inorganic phosphate and adenosine diphosphate, which is just in the body, and we make ATP, which can be broken down again. Okay, so what does that all mean? This is the primary source of energy when we do things that are typically from 0 to 15 seconds. That's how we get that ATP. This is the one that we are going to be most using, and it's things that are high intensity use this energy system. So if you think of just pulling a heavy deadlift off the floor, that would be doing this, using this energy system rather. Or if you think of it this way, a 100-meter sprint would be using this energy system. All right, we're going to move on to the glycolytic energy system. Okay, so it derives ATP from blood glucose and glycogen stores. Like I said, there are How does adrenaline work in the system? That's a different neurologic pathway that we're not going to talk about right now. I will address that kind of after I talk about the two other energy systems, okay? So glycolytic energy system derives ATP from blood glucose and the glycogen stores. Like I said before, our muscles have a lot of glycogen stored in them. And this is the primary energy system for activities that last between 20 seconds to 2 minutes. Okay? So you guys know, like I said, when you eat a lot of carbohydrates, they're broken down, and then the ATP or the glycogen gets stored in the muscles, which can then be broken down into ATP to produce energy when we need it. Okay, so glycolytic energy systems, 20 seconds to 2 minutes. You know how the phosphagen system was like a 100-meter sprint? This is going to be like your 400-meter, 800-meter sprint is going to be kind of using this energy system. Okay. Oxidative system, it derives the ATP molecule from blood glucose and muscle glycogen. In the presence of oxygen is about 30%, okay, for the muscle glycogen. And then we derive the ATP from fat, which is about the other 70%. So this is the other energy system. So anything lasting longer than 2 minutes uses this. So this is going to be like your 5Ks, anything longer, your half, your marathon is primarily using your oxidative system. Okay. It's important to note that no matter the duration of the type of training you are doing, all energy systems are going to be active. It's just a matter of which one is going to be delivering most of that ATP, depending on how long the activity is. Okay. So say we're in minute 20 of our 5K race, we're still getting ATP molecules from all three energy systems. It's just majority of it, probably 95% or above, is going to be from that oxidative system. All right. And adrenaline work in the system. So when we have stressors to the body, neurologic pathways are initiated that release adrenaline, which raises, what's the word I'm looking for? Heightened state of awareness. So I can't remember off the top of my head what the signaling for that is, but a great resource for that, it actually does talk about that in the periodization text by Bompa. So if you want to learn more about that, definitely look that up. In terms of physiological arousal, it will heighten that, which is good for some occurrences in sport and not so much for others. I know you can get like a big adrenaline rush in what's it called? When you're close to the end of a race and you feel like you catch a second wind for like the last 200 meters, that can kind of help you get through there, if that makes any sense, Lisa. Any other questions? Cool. Let's move on. So yeah, like I said before, this is just a diagram from the text. So if an event lasts 6 seconds, maximum intensity, you're primarily using ATP system, and then so on and so forth. It goes from very not oxygen based to very oxygen based of how we get that ATP derived. So I'll let you guys take a look at that for a second. I'm not going to read it all out there for you. All right, I'm going to move on here. Training considerations, okay? So sport breeding performance is maximized when a sequential approach is taken, progressing from multilateral to specialized training. So kind of meaning when we go from very general training further out from the competition or event to more specific training closer to the event. So an example of this would be the sport of weightlifting. A weightlifter, essentially what a weightlifter is doing is trying to peak their power, how fast they can move a load. So they start very general, further out from competition. So they're going to start training a lot of strength, a lot of work capacity type stuff. And as the competition gets closer, they're going to be less general with their training and get more specific to moving a weight really fast, which is what the clean and jerk and snatch are, if that makes sense. So if we were to kind of use endurance-based sport example, so let's just take a 5K. Further out from your race, you're going to be doing kind of more, what's it called? General physical preparedness type work. Then you're going to transition to working on strength. You'll transition to working on speed, and then transition to working on endurance leading up into the event. Okay? Training load should be a sequence such that each phase or block of training will potentiate the next. And that's where we talk about the medium duration cyclic sports, which is kind of what like a 5K would be. Do your very general work capacity stuff, your strength, speed, and endurance. And each one is a prerequisite to the other for the goal of getting the 5K. Kind of, if you think of a pyramid, the ones further out, the general ones, would be the base. And as you get closer to the event, you move higher up to the peak, which is where you want to be for race day. Okay. And each phase should be built off the previous phase. So it gets very wide at the bottom and it goes kind of skinnier to the point at the top, if that makes sense. And then training should always be planned according to tolerance level. And just a few things to take into consideration when planning training is training history. What have you done before, essentially? What has worked for you before? What type of sports have you done before will all play a key factor in how you organize your training. Kind of like you won't give someone super specific things to do if they haven't built that big uh, general training base, if that makes sense. Okay. Health status. Are you working with any injuries? Do you have any other underlying medical conditions? And how exercise will play a role with that. Stress and recovery rate. Not only in terms of training stress, but stress outside of training as well. Someone that has a very stressful work life, stressful family life will be able to tolerate a lot less training stress than someone that is not stressed at work, not stressed out by their family or finances or whatever, just because the body doesn't differentiate stressors in the sense that when you go to the gym, it knows you did a bicep curl stress versus like you got into a fight with your significant other. It just kind of interprets everything as stress. So that's a really important consideration to take into your own organization of training. And if you're doing that for anyone else, ask them what their life is outside the gym. And like I said before, injury history. If they have injuries in the past, that will indicate kind of weaknesses that they may have, and you should address those. Okay. And again, what I said before about going from general to specific, it's not only specific to someone trying to perform better in an athletic event, but you'll also see this with people's training age. When they're younger, they're going to be doing a lot more general training, just kind of learning the basics of how to move their body, how to lift appropriately, how to run, develop endurance. But as they get older and they find the things they want to specialize in, the amount of general training that they're going to do is going to decrease just because they've built that base already, and it's going to go up the pyramid where it gets kind of a little skinnier. And the things you're going to focus on are going to be more tailored towards what you want to be better at, if that makes sense. To kind of use an example, are you guys familiar with Roger Federer? He was a really good tennis player. I don't think he's active anymore, but 5, 10 years ago, kind of back end of his career, he was kind of a really perfect example of that. He played all the sports under the sun, had a really big training base, and he actually didn't specialize in tennis until he was 18. And that's one of the reasons why he did so well, is because he had such a big training base. He was well versed in uh, movement patterns, his ability to be strong and have endurance, and he didn't focus on specializing too early. And that's what he himself credits a lot of his success to. Okay, we're going to move on here to the next key concepts, variation. Okay, so variation is the systemic varying of stimuli to elicit higher levels of performance. These stimuli can include reps, sets, tempo, rest periods, volume, intensity, duration, density, and exercise selection. So I'll kind of define those real quick. Reps is kind of like if you're doing resistance training, how many repetitions you would do in a set. And sets would be how many total sets you do for that exercise within the workout. Tempo could be thought of as uh, how fast or slow you raise and lower the weights. Rest periods is the time you take to relax, grab some water between sets. Volume can be thought of as kind of the load used times by the rest or the sets and reps rather. Intensity can be thought of as a percentage of a 1 rep maximum. So say someone has a 100 kilo deadlift that they can do for 1 repetition. They're not just going to deadlift 100 kilos for 1 repetition every time they work out. They're going to organize their training to use percentages of their best at varying sets and rep combinations with different rest periods and tempos to elicit and build that further if that is the desired outcome. Duration, kind of how long you do something for. This kind of is a little more specific to endurance sports. So how long you go for a run for, that can be one of the ways you do it. Organize your training. Density can be thought of as how much training you're able to get in within a certain time. So if you think of it from a what's it called, an endurance sport lens, it would be maybe how many kilometers you run or ride within a week, and then the exercise selection, the different exercises you can do. Are you going to go for a run? Are you going to swim? Are you going to lift weights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And typically, variations are chosen to target specific weaknesses that an individual may possess. So, for example, if we take a back squat, if the goal is to get a bigger 1 rep max on a back squat, you're going to address the areas and spots that you have trouble with the back squat. So, if your training indicates that you have weaker quads coming out of the hole in the squat, what you're going to do to supplement that would be something to target your weak quads. So, for example, if that would be a front squat. If you find that you have a weak upper back in a back squat, the training variation that you'd want to use to address that would be a safety squat bar squat, things like that. So, for example, I'm trying to think of one in endurance. Okay, so if you find you're hitting the wall in a 5K run pretty early on in the race, like less than halfway, you may want to do a little more tempo training, tempo runs. So you have onset of blood lactate accumulation happening a little later on or higher up in your VO2 max. Okay. Really important to note this next one. So varying stimuli for the sake of variation will not elicit higher level of performance. Okay, just doing random stuff for the sake of doing random stuff is not a good approach to take. Like I said before, everything you do The variations that you do should be specific to making you better, which is typically is addressing weaknesses. And they should be organized in a way that it builds off one another, your different variations, the way you schedule your programming to make you perform better. If you're just varying stimuli for the sake of varying stimuli, you're not training for performance. You may be training for health, you may be training to manage stress, but that is not the way to elicit higher performance. And I'm not saying you shouldn't vary your training, you should. There just should be a method to the madness, and everything you do should have a reason. Okay? Like I said, variations used should be selected to elicit specific responses with considerations for the context of the specific spot in the training plan. And this is kind of the basis of periodization. You could think of it as a balancing act between doing the same thing over and over again and introducing specific variations. So you get better at the end goal. So kind of a balance between doing the same thing and doing different things. All right. So I'm going to come back here. Any questions on that? I know that was a lot to take in before we move on. Okay, we're going to go. Okay. So again, volume and intensity. Volume is kind of like the total amount of work you do. Again, it can be thought of as like your sets, your reps times your load. Can be looked at the individual level, like the individual session level, your individual workout. Could be looked at the level of kind of a microcycle, a macro cycle, an annual plan cycle. And intensity is the percentage of the best. It's important to note that these are inversely related. If you're doing something that has a lot of work, it cannot be done at the same intensity that something that is not a lot of work can do. And a great example to illustrate this is the 100-meter sprint speed versus a marathon speed. So everyone knows that Usain Bolt is the fastest human on earth. When he runs the 100-meter sprint, which he does in 9.58 seconds, he's running at 27 miles per hour. Think about that for a second, of how ridiculous and amazing that is that a human can do that. And on the flip side, or before I go and talk about that, Usain Bolt, he would be an example of someone that does something at a very high intensity. Okay? And I'm going to butcher his name. Eliud Kipchoge. He's the man, first guy to run a marathon in sub 2 hours. He ran his marathon in 1 hour, 59 minutes, and 40 seconds. He ran that marathon at 13.16 miles per hour. So he's kind of that other end of the spectrum where the intensity isn't quite as high. He's not running as fast, but he did a much greater quantity of work. All right. All righty. And that's very nice. I'm glad your Harley goes 27, Leona. No. Any questions on how volume and intensity are inversely related before we move on? Awesome. Okay, let's go. Okay, so we got the organization of the annual plan. So organization of the annual training plan, which I will refer to as ATP, not to be confused with adenosine triphosphate. So you have the year plan, it's broken down into phases, which are broken down into subphases, which are broken down into macrocycles, which are broken down into microcycles, which are broken down into the individual training sessions. So I know this is a lot to take in, and I'm just going to jump ahead a few slides just to kind of present a clear illustration of this. So if you're looking at this slide here, we have the annual plan at the top. So that's the whole training plan for the year. Then you have the phases that it's broken down into. So which you can see there, those phases are broken down into subphases. The subphases have the macrocycles. The macrocycles have the microcycles. And in each one of those microcycles, they have, individual plans of the workouts you're going to be doing that day. Okay, so this is what we are looking at, and this is what we are going to define here. So I'm going to jump back here. So the division of the annual training plan, it's 3 main phases. You got your preparatory phase, which the point of that is to establish the physiological foundation for performance, kind of like the base of that pyramid we've been talking about before. You've got your competitive phase, which is the point of that is to maximize your performance capacity. And then you have a third one called a transition phase. And the point of this one is to dissipate fatigue that's built up from competition and the previous phase, and to prepare psychologically for the next preparatory phase. So it's kind of like the rest after all the hard work you did preparing for the competition. Okay? So I'm going to move on here. Subphases of the preparatory phase. So the first one is your general preparation. And again, the focus is to develop a physiological base by using many non-specific training methods. Okay? Again, that's the very, very bottom of the pyramid, going to be very wide, very general, not specific to the task that we are trying to get better at. Okay? Specific preparation, the focus is to develop the characteristics required for the sport by using sport-specific methods. So we're starting to go up the pyramid a little bit. We're not doing as many general things. They're starting to become a little more tailored for the thing we're going to get better at. Okay? After that, we have the subphases of the competitive phase, which the first one is pre-competitive. So again, we're becoming more specific in the things that we do, but this is also the section of the training where exhibitions will occur. And they serve as a training tool to objectively give feedback on an athlete's training level, their preparedness, their tactical, technical, and physical skills. So this is kind of used as a check before the competitions start counting or mattering. So again, the reason for this is it allows for any kind of last minute changes to be addressed to in training and to be made prior to the competition for when they count. And when I say last minute changes in training, we're talking more so like the technical aspects of training or tactical, okay? And then you have competitive. So this is what we are maximizing the preparedness for, and it's to allow for superior performances. So again, we're super specific here. 2 to 3 weeks out from the competition, the peak will occur. This will usually be the largest intensity for strength-based sports or the largest volume for endurance-based sports. And after that, it'll be followed by a taper varying from 1 to 2 weeks out. And this is a drastic decrease in training volume and intensity, typically 40 to 60% of what you achieved in the previous subphase. And this allows for that super compensation that we talked about prior to occur. So it helps an athlete peak their performance for competition and dissipate their fatigue that they built up over the previous subphases. Okay. And again, I will go to the next slide here. I'll let you look at that and just digest that with that extra information that we talked about, okay? So I'll give you your 30 seconds to a minute here. Okay, so we have a question. So if we do a half marathon, 5K the month before would be prepping? Or are you talking with like the 5K the month before? Are you asking if that would be done in as like a peak for a half marathon? Just let me know in the comments there, Lisa. A month before the half? I'm thinking typically not. Okay, so general rule of thumb, when you want to hit your peak, you unless someone is doing something that's very, very taxing, in terms of volume wise or intensity wise, I don't think you'd want to do that. Uh, have that peak a whole month before. I think you're fine getting away between 2 and 3 weeks out having the peak for most people. Again, that's going to boil down to individual differences. So if you've been working with someone or if you've been doing a lot of this yourself, um, you'll know kind of where that is a little better and how to structure that. Again, depending on the different stressors, how long they've been training, and the things we talked about before will influence that. But a peak for a half marathon will usually be like 90% of the volume you'll be doing in a marathon. You might go up to like 92, 93, or sometimes down to like 88, just depending on the specifics. But something a month before at that volume would be, I would think, be inappropriate. Um, you should be able to do more than a 5K a month before the half, is basically what I'm getting at. Just because for endurance based events, leading up to the peak, volume isn't going to decrease. It's going to be the opposite of that. Like volume gradually will increase as we head into that peak. So in terms of volume, what's it called? In terms of volume, 5K is going to be relatively a lot smaller than the half K you're going to run. So you should probably be doing that in like a general prep phase or specific preparation for trying to be peaked for a half marathon. So that's going to be a lot further down the line. I hope that kind of answers the question. Okay, I know that was a bit of a ramble there, but I'm glad we're on the same page. Okay, we're going to talk about a practical application here. Holy moly, my words aren't working here. Let me grab a sip of water before we get into this. All right. So the practical application that we're doing, the thing that we're going about is 5 kilometers, okay? A 5 km race, we're running it. You have 16 weeks to prepare. Your person is going to be training 5 times a week. So we're going to spend 4 weeks on the general physical preparedness. So if we look back, that'd be kind of like your general preparation of your preparatory phase, okay? So what that's going to look like, or how I would organize it for someone that's kind of an intermediate level runner, and what I'll define an intermediate level runner is like someone that could run a 5K anywhere between like 31 to 27 and a half minutes. So out of the training 5 times a week, when we're in that general physical preparedness phase, we're going to resistance train 3 times a week. We're going to build a bit of a work capacity. So most of the reps probably between like 8, 12, and we're going to be running twice a week. One of those runs is going to be for distance. One of them is going to be for recovery. And the volume of the runs is going to be relatively low to how it's going to be in weeks following, or not weeks, phases following, if that makes any sense. Okay. After the general physical preparedness, we're going to do 4 weeks focusing on strength. So again, we're still going to be resistance training 3 times a week. This is going to be higher intensity of work than we did in the previous phase. Most of the work probably fall in between 75, 1% of 1 rep max, just because that is where we will make most of our strength gains from. Again, the exercise selection is going to be still relatively general, but slightly more specific. So we're still going to be focusing on just our general strength training movements, your squat, deadlift. For the lower body, probably be doing some sort of pull up or pulling work. for the upper body for strength, but we won't be doing as much accessory movements as we did in the previous one. So kind of like a lot of the things to build up those big movements that we talked about, okay? We're still going to be running twice a week, but we're going to alternate. There's going to be 2 runs for distance one week. And then the other week, there's going to be 1 run for distance, 1 run for recovery. So again, like I said, we're slowly building that volume of how much we're running. And the weekly kilometer run will increase in this phase. So the runs will get longer in this phase than they were in the last phase. Is everyone following me so far? Just give a shout in the comments there. Sweet. Okay, moving on. So we're going to, go on to the next phase. We're working 3 weeks. It's going to be focused on speed. So we're resistance training twice a week. The intensities will still be high, but the total volume of the amount of resistance training we are doing is going to be lower. Everything's going to be on a retaining load. So that's about 60 to 70% resistance training volume of the last phase. So we're not looking to get stronger here. We're looking to actualize that into speed, and our intent is going to focus on moving the weights faster as opposed to lifting things that are heavier, if that makes sense. Now we're doing more running. We're running 3 times a week. So we're going to be alternating between 2 speed, 1 tempo, or lactate threshold work on 1 week, and the other week it's going to be 1 speed, 1 tempo, 1 endurance run. And we're going to just alternate that back and forth, okay? After that, we're going to spend 3 weeks on endurance. We're going to resistance train twice a week. Intensity is still high, but our volume is going to be even lower than the previous phase. It's going to be 60 to 70% of what we did in that previous phase of where we were working on speed. We're still running 3 times a week, except this time we're going to do 2 endurance runs and 1 speed run for 1 week, and for week 1 and 3 rather. And then the second week, we're going to do 2 endurance runs and 1 tempo run for the second week. And then the last week will be the peak. So the largest volume of running that will happen in this week. And after that week, we're going to start our taper. Okay. So the taper is going to last 2 weeks. This is going to be 40 to 60% of the total volume of the last phase for training. So we're doing very little resistance training of what we did last time. We're resistance training like 1 time a week, and we're only running twice a week. And it's only going to be 40 to 60% of the total volume. And then after that, we should be feeling nice, rested, ready to perform, ready to smash the race on the race day. So that's kind of how we would take all those concepts that I talked about previously about systemic organization of training and how to vary it and how to make it like really general at the beginning. That 16 weeks out, we're super general. We're not doing as much running. But as we get closer to the run, we tend to go up that pyramid, up to the peak, where we get super specific. Okay. Or before we get into events, is there any questions on kind of how I organize that training? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, we're going to move on. Let's talk about some events that are actually happening here. And let's talk about different ways that we can strategize to kind of mix things up and kind of better our performance or achieve the goal of those specific events. Okay. So the first one that is happening, and by the way, these are all virtual just because of the global pandemic that's happening. The first one is the Army Run. So this one is taking place between the 12th and the 20th of September. And basically what this is, since we're not doing this in person, it's taking place virtually. The events are the same as if they were happening in person. You can do a 5K, a 10K, they do a 15K, you can do a half marathon and a full marathon. You just have to do it between those events and submit your times. Okay. So, how would I go about training for this, especially since this event is so close in the future? I honestly wouldn't change anything that you are doing for this event coming up between the 12th and the 20th of September. What I would do everything that you were doing, follow the plan you were following according to, or right down to the T. Take notes of how you felt, how you did after the fact based on your performance. Reflect back, uh, look where there could have been weaknesses in your preparation leading up to the event. Take that into consideration when you're planning out your next preparation for a run, and try to apply some of the concepts that we talked about today to that and see if it does any better for you. That's what I would do for that. Usually people that are doing like 10K and up, they usually have a pretty solid plan to peak themselves for those events. And those that are like really serious about the 5K, that want to get those crazy times that are close to 20 minutes or whatever, they have a solid plan going into those. Now is not the time to change anything. Leave everything as it is. Like I said, after the fact, evaluate what went well, what didn't go well, address what didn't go well in the future training plan going ahead. Okay. Navy bike ride. So basically, this is an event that is happening between the 13th of June and the 30th of August. And they want a total of 25,000 bike rides to happen between that time to commemorate the 25,000 voyages of the Canadian Naval and Merchant Navy Forces, our Navy Forces voyages that took place during World War II and the Battle of the Atlantic. How it works is you just register to track your rides, and each commute via bike is a ride. So, for example, I was talking to Diane about this earlier. She's participating in this one. She is riding from her place to work. So, from her house to the work would be count as one ride, and when she rides back home from work to home, that'll count as another ride. Diane, correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's kind of the gist of this one. Okay. And yeah, they're at 23,000 rides right now, which is awesome. Means they're really close to achieving that goal. Okay. So if you have um, a goal you've set for this, you know how many rides you have left to do. All you really have to do is plan out your rides. And remember, like anything else in life, failing to plan is planning to fail. Just make sure you're prepared. There's a few different ways you can go about these rides. If you've been doing a lot of them, they're becoming stale or boring. Again, we're not trying to perform super well with these rides. There isn't any kind of medal or anything to win. So we're looking more for just fun. So try to do it with your friends. Visit your local parks and trailers. I know in we're based in the Winnipeg area. We have a few really nice parks in the city that we can go ride through. We have Birds Hill Provincial Park that's not too far away from the city. If you want to go ride to there, ride around there, ride back, um, take advantage of those national provincial parks if they're close to you. And another way to do it, commute to and from work. You can commute to the next small town and back based on distance and how prepared and what level of fitness you have. So there's a few different ways to go about trying to get those rides. Okay. Moving on, there's the Great Cycle Challenge Canada, which is happening this month, August 2020. So it's a fundraiser for the Sick Kids Foundation, which is a charity that helps kids with cancer. How you do it is you register, you set a goal of I want to achieve X amount of kilometers a month, and you track your kilometers for each ride. Um, so with this being said, I know there was some function on the webpage that if you had this time on writing X amount of kilometers, it gave you this goal, that goal, that goal. So based on how many kilometers you have left to achieve in the month is what you know you need to do. This is where the planning becomes really important. Take some time out of your day, divide the number of kilometers you have to do against the number of training days you have left. And this doesn't necessarily mean that each ride you do has to be the same amount. It doesn't have to be an equal divide. Some days can be longer rides, some days can be shorter rides, but make sure you plan them out so you do achieve them. Way to do this, plan the routes for each ride. So, for example, on an off day, say Sunday, you're not doing anything. Even though you're not doing anything physical in terms of riding your bike, you can still get yourself prepared for the upcoming week. Plan your routes. If you have a spin bike at home, way to get those extra miles and kilometers in. Place it in front of a screen and just do low intensity kilometers as you binge watch your favorite show. It'll be a form of active recovery, essentially, right? Get your Netflix on, throw a movie, whatever's on TV. If there's a sporting event, just a great way to kind of kill two birds with one stone there. And another way just to help you achieve and get all those miles that you have to get by the end of the month, so you might need something a little new. Find a new bike path. There's tons of references online. I know for my friends in Winnipeg, the City of Winnipeg website has different paths for biking and walking. So that's that blue link you see down there. There's bikemap.net, Map My Ride. And if you're still having trouble just finding new routes to ride, don't find new routes. Ride the same routes, just ride them the opposite way, right? Every route is some form of a whole circle, right? It may not be a perfectly round circle, but if you always ride it counterclockwise each and every time, go the opposite way. You're going to be able to see the same things, but at a slightly different perspective. Going the other way, it's going to feel a little more fresh than doing the same thing every single time. All right. So those are just a few strategies you can implement to help you achieve and the end result for those events there. Okay. Other than that, that brings me to the end of all the information I wanted to share with you all today. Do you guys have any questions before I hand this back over to Diane?
That was really good.
Again, like I said before I sign off here, I know that was a lot to throw at you guys for the little over an hour we've been going here today. So I want to thank you for your patience, first of all, for not just leaving here. Other than that, again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or any of the other PSP staff at Winnipeg. Like I said before, all the information I got from the periodization text by Bompa and Half. Check that out if you want to do so. If you need to go back, watch things over again, jot more notes down, these presentations will be available after the fact as well. Okay? So thank you for sitting through this with me, listening to my whiny voice for over an hour. I don't see too many questions here, so I'm throwing it back over to Diane to sign you guys out, all right?
Yeah, that was great, Antosh. Thank you. And actually, I'm also doing the Great Cycle Challenge. So I just did my check my mileage, and I have 63 kilometers to do in the next 4 days. So I need to plan how I'm going to spread that out. I think I've got a plan though.
Very good.
It should be good. So thanks so much. That was super fun. And I really like the thing about doing stuff in the opposite direction because I sometimes do that and I'd be surprised at what I find when I go the other way. And sometimes it feels easier the other way too. So it's kind of interesting to do that. So we'll just go over the last couple of slides for you guys. So the resources, Canadian Forces Members Assistance Program is there for you, 1-800, 365 days of the year. It's a referrals program. EAP for the military members. If you're a civilian member, this is also the same phone number that you would use, completely confidential and outside of the chain of command. Canada's Suicide Hotline for anybody who is suffering from mental health issues. If you're concerned about suicide, please give this number a call. If you're looking for information on COVID-19, please contact the Canadian government website. They have the most up to date information on that. The family information line is another 1-800 number, 365 days of the year, 24/7 bilingual service that has actual counselors on the line. So if you have any questions about anything, you can contact them. And they are a military line as well. So they understand the military lifestyle. Sexual Misconduct Response Center is there for all things sexual in nature. If you need to get a hold of them, they're there for you. Kids Help Phone, if your children are struggling or if you as a parent are struggling, they can give you some advice and help there. The ARC line in support of COVID 19 is the Canadian Armed Forces line to help answer all questions related to COVID 19. So, one last poll to do. So, do you feel like you can apply what you've learned today to your daily living? Did this help you answer some of the questions that you had? That's great to see. So glad. Yeah, it was very interesting, Antosh. I quite enjoyed it. And then finally, if you have any questions, this is how you contact us. If you need to contact Antosh, there's his email address. And again, you can always contact me and I can forward anything on to Antosh should you need to get a hold of him. And then finally, we only have 2 more sessions left. So next week, we're going to talk about injury, dealing with those setbacks. What do you do if you get injured while you're training? So David Chung will be joining us on that one. And then on the 9th of September, we'll be celebrating the success that we've done it. And we will have some of the fitness instructors who have been delivering these modules with me online. So if you have any questions that haven't been answered or might be coming up, that would be a really good chance to be able to ask them. They'll do a Q&A for you. So if there's not any other questions, I will say goodbye to you and hopefully see you next week. Antosh, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you for not breaking your tablets or phones or computers or calling me an idiot over the chat and taking it easy on me on my first webinar, guys. No, it was a slice. So, uh, yeah,
You did a great job, Antosh.
thank you.
All right. So hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye now.